Why do we get nervous in a job interview? And how can I overcome being nervous? That's the subject of today's job chat. I'm Hector Silva along with Don Apple.
Hector, the butterflies, the jitters, that feeling of fear. I think we've all experienced that prior to a job interview. Let's find out how to overcome those feelings.
And our guest today to help us find that out is Mike Bailey.
During his time in sales and marketing, Mike was responsible for the design and delivery of hundreds of presentations. He developed some unique methods for dynamic presentations and for turning complex technical issues into easily understood presentations. Mike now offers seminars and workshops aimed at all levels of skill, from CEO to private individuals, in all aspects of preparing and delivering presentations and speeches. The power to communicate live and influence is an essential skill today. Mike, welcome to Job Chat.
Good morning, Don. Thank you. Good morning, Hector.
Good morning, Mike. Mike, what is causing us to be nervous prior to and during an interview?
The unknown. It's a common thing with people. We like to be in control. We like to understand what's going on. So how do we prepare? Because preparation is a part of not being so nervous. But Mark Twain said there are two types of presenters: those that are nervous and those that are liars. It's about how do we control it. You're going to be nervous, right? Accept that fact. But channel that into positive energy, not into negative energy.
So that's not just in a job interview. If you're presenting to a group or anything, it's still the same situation.
It's the same.
You still have to control that nervousness.
Whether it's one-on-one or 1 to 1,000, it's just the same.
Now, when you say preparation, does that mean practicing? Does it mean making sure that you know what you're going to say, or think about what do you mean when you say that? All of these things you have to know before you go into that job interview?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Certainly, preparation is a critical part of being prepared.
Okay.
Do as much research as you can beforehand on the company. It's going to give you the opportunity to ask questions. But when we're prepared and we know about the job, well, hopefully we know certainly some areas of the job, we know about the company, we've got to prepare ourselves. How do we channel that negative nervousness, which is how so many people feel? You get the sweats, your mouth dries up. How do we channel that into positive energy? Well, we've got to prepare ourselves. Deep breathing. And when I say deep breathing, this is breathing at a level much deeper than you would normally do in your automatic breathing.
And how far ahead do you start this deep breathing?
Hopefully a few minutes before,
Okay.
if you get that opportunity to do it.
So you're sitting out in the lobby waiting for your interview.
Perfect.
That's
Perfect
the time to do it.
Perfect time. And nobody needs see that you're doing this. You can do it completely unseen, right? You're just going to take a deep breath. When I train people, I train them in, okay, we're going to start fairly easy. We breathe in for a count, we hold for a count, and then breathe out for double that count. That breathing out for a double count is important, because when we control the flow of breath from our lungs, it gives an air of confidence. If you're really nervous and you don't have enough air in your lungs, that's going to show. And the person who's interviewing you, or the group, or however that's happening, will see that and will sense that immediately. So, breathe in for a count of 2, hold it for 2, out for 4. Then breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 4, out for 8. And then 8, 8, 16. That's a hard one. You can't just breathe from your diaphragm. You've got to breathe from your abdomen. Right? But do it. Holding that breath is important. Your blood gets oxygenated to a high level. It's going to enable you to think much more quickly. And that's one of the things. How am I going to pull out of my mind all these things that I want to say? Don't worry about what you're going to say. You know your subject. Your subject is you. You know you. If you don't, well, I'm sorry, but you know you better than anybody else. Just be concerned about what you're going to talk about. So maybe on your sheet of paper, and I've seen this many times, just have some talking points. Today, we're talking about talking points, right? Just a single word, that's all you need. It will prompt you about that particular subject, the element that you want to actually talk about.
And since you're already thinking more clearly, since you've done the breathing exercise, it will come natural.
It will come.
So the physical helps the mental.
Yes, it does. Very much so. Yeah.
And you still have to prepare from the mental aspect what you're going to say, or at least the talking points of what you're going to do.
Right.
How about practice? Does that help with the nervousness?
Role play. Get someone to help you. And New Landings is just great because of the opportunities here within the group where you can find someone and they will help you. Find someone to help you role play. Let them be the interviewer. Plenty of people with experience of doing that. And try and be as realistic as possible. Get them to ask some really hard questions, questions that perhaps you hadn't thought about, but it's going to get you into that mode of preparation.
And from a physical perspective, when you're saying get into that mode, does that mean if you're going to role play and if you're going to do this practice, you should also be dressed in business dress and just as you would be in an interview so that it mirrors exactly what you're going to go through?
I would certainly recommend that. If you look at a play, everything that goes up to the performance is all done very casual. Then you have the dress rehearsal, where you're actually dressed and everything is going to happen exactly as it's going to happen on stage. Now, we're not talking about a stage for an interview, but there are similarities. And that's an excellent point, Hector. Yes, dressing business casual or whatever is appropriate. And that's the thing. What's appropriate for this interview? What you don't want is to, and I've interviewed hundreds if not thousands of people in my time. And this is much harder for gals than it is for guys. Because the choice that you have is so much greater, right? What you don't want is your dress to speak more loudly than you. You don't want it to be in the way of you. So
it should complement you, but not be overbearing.
You got it.
Okay. Another aspect in the interview and the nervousness that I've heard you point out before that I have taken to heart is the pause.
Yes.
Expound on that.
Okay.
But first, pause.
What is a pause? How many times have you heard people, when you're communicating, okay, you know, I don't know. Don't tell your interviewer you know, because they don't. These are what we call verbalized pauses. So instead of just shutting up, zip it, you're trying to fill that time with something that you're saying. There is much more power in the silent pause at the right time, of course. Not halfway.
He's very good at this.
Yes, he is.
Through a sentence. See, you missed that. Let me do that again. Halfway through a sentence, right? That's just stupid, right? But if you're going to add power to what you're saying, that pause and the timing of that pause, giving that right emphasis, it's really putting a visual, in many respects, into the verbal and the vocal.
You also said at one time, what are you going to talk about and what are you going to say?
Yes.
What's the difference there?
Okay. Talking about is the subject. or a key word. Take a sentence. Every sentence has a key word. When people are listening to you, they're not listening to every single word. There are exceptions. Politicians, yeah, they're going to be recorded and every word analysed, the nuances, how did they see it, the body language, everything, right? Hopefully in an interview they're not going to do that for you. But it really is very critical in terms of not worrying about what you're going to say. Those are all the words that you fill in around that key word. The person listening, the person interviewing, is not going to hear all those individual words. They will put a perception around what they're seeing and hearing. So one of the reasons we get so nervous is that we think that we're going to forget all these words that we're going to say. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. Just be you. Those words will come. And when you're relaxed, doing that deep breathing, it's amazing the difference. I'm sure people can relate to, okay, we're in an interview or we're doing a presentation. That first 30 seconds, 2 minutes, it's the most terrifying time because we haven't gauged the situation. We don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to dry up? And when we get past that and we relax, it all starts to flow quite naturally. We get into a conversation. So being prepared for that first 30 seconds, 2 minutes is so important. A 100-yard sprinter doesn't start sprinting at 10 yards or 25 yards. They're full speed immediately. They come out of those blocks and they're running like crazy, right? You couldn't run the race if you're going to start at 10 or 25 yards. It's just the same with a presentation. You've got to hit the ground running. You've got to show that you're keen, you're enthusiastic, you're a great person, your personality really has to come across. And if you're going to just dribble it out to start with, doesn't help. You've got a lot of recovery. If you've only got a 20-minute, 30-minute interview, you can't afford for those first 5 minutes to just dribble out.
So what you're going to say is going to come naturally because you have the expertise. You've either done the job before or done something like it or been trained to do it.
Right.
So that part's going to take care of itself. It's that first impression you're talking about.
Right.
Where does body language come into that first impression?
Okay. Let's give you some examples of body language. Okay. Watch your interviewers. As you're sitting at the moment, you're both leaning forward. You are expecting, you want to hear, you want to do that. If they're just sitting back like this, they're not yet engaged. You've got to get them engaged. And the sooner you can get them moving forwards, the sooner you're going to be able to get engaged with them. Have you seen people doing that? Have you seen your interviewer doing that? What's happening? They're engaged. They're thinking about what you're
focused.
They're thinking about what you're saying.
And putting the hand to the face.
And the face.
And
yeah.
focusing
on you. Right.
Okay.
They're thinking deeply about what you've said. Watch their eye movements at this point. Which way are their eyes going? It's going to help you again in how you communicate with that person.
It helps you to mirror them, like we had discussed previously, with the visual and the verbal, and what they react to best.
Yeah. I'm really bored at the moment. I'm not engaged. My voice is boring. I've got no intonation in it. I'm leaning back. I've got my arms folded. You've lost them. You've talked too much. Ask a question. Get them back engaged.
It sounds to me like you're saying that you can take control of the interview.
Yes, you can. When you know and understand this, absolutely you can. And it's just the same in a live presentation. It's actually fun.
Not only can you, you must.
You've got to be careful not to be overpowering. It's their show. You've got to accept that it's their show. But in the time slot that you've got, how do you get over what you want to say? Sure, you've got to answer their questions, but there are some key things that in the research that you've done, you're going to know, I've got to get this point across. I believe this is really important. Ask a question that's then going to get you into what it is you want to say.
There's a lot of people that I've dealt with in my life where when they walk out that door, I may not remember every word they said, but I do remember them and how they reacted or how they moved.
That's just what we've been saying here. You don't remember the words, but you get a perception. What perception are you creating with your communication? That's an excellent point that you've made there, Hector.
And we have talked about the interview. I think many times we get the opportunity to do our interview in that elevator speech. Probably more times in the elevator speech format than in an actual interview.
Right.
Tips on that elevator speech.
Okay. I love this one.
Okay.
How many times have you been to a networking event, for instance, and how do people give their elevator speech? They start off with, "Hi, I'm Mike Bailey, I'm a Bailey presentation, blah, 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 blah."
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you listened?
Not really.
Why? Because they didn't address your problems.
Right.
If you start your elevator speech with you, you're out the door. You've got to start with them.
Make it about
What's
them.
their problem? It's at this stage, it's not about you. You comes last. Because until they're listening to you and they're engaged, yes, I think this person can solve my problem. There's no point in saying who you are because they're not going to listen.
And they won't remember it.
No.
The other thing about that elevator speech is we do it so many times that we just say the words. And people can tell that you've done it a million times because you're just saying the words.
It's a script.
It has to be as if you're saying it for the first time.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. So how do you get that? How do you make sure that every time you say it, it sounds fresh and it sounds new?
Have you ever been to... Sorry, I so often turn a question into another question, right? Because this is going to illustrate, visual, the point. Do you ever go to the theatre and watch a play? Just
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
No, I think a lot of us have done that. What do you expect from those actors?
I expect to be entertained.
I expect to be entertained, but I also expect it to be as if they're doing it for the first time. I don't want to see them just walk through it as if they're zombies.
Exactly. They've got to have that power, that vibrancy, the entertainment as such. They could have done it 100 times. You've got to take yourself out of the way, and you've got to always be thinking of your audience. And you've got to speak to the audience. You've got to speak to that person as if it is just the first time.
And for that person listening, it is the first time.
Yes, it is. And that, so much of communication, and I see people, I go to networking events a lot. People are talking. They're talking about themselves all the time. They're not engaging. When it's all tell, I call it the prepaid cellular syndrome. There's a company called Alltel that does prepaid cellular. When it's all tell, you've lost them. The attention span of an adult is not much better than a child. A child is about 5 seconds, an adult is about 7 seconds. So
You have 2 more seconds.
unless it's two-way, it's not a communication.
Mm-hmm. If I can just take you back to practicing again, something just entered my mind and I wanted to ask. Videoing or recording the practice, does that help in any way?
Enormously. Because until you see yourself as your audience sees you, you won't understand the things that you're doing. Mm-hmm. If you're in an interview and you get asked a question and you say something and then scratch your head, your interviewer totally subconsciously won't realize this, but they immediately put a question mark in their head because you've actually said something that you're not comfortable saying. And that gets recognized within our psyche without realizing. When you know and understand these things, then you can control it. So whatever you're saying, never touch your head or your face when you've said something, because it says, I'm not comfortable saying this.
And a lot of times we do that subconsciously.
Yes, and
so
that's where
by
the video
helps.
will show you that. Play the video back at twice speed, so it's showing all your movements, and you'll be amazed at what you're doing. I do that? Yes, you do.
But until you see it yourself,
Yes.
you're probably
Yeah.
not going to believe it.
Just like driving a car, you've got to practice. You can't learn to ride a bike at a seminar. You've got to get on it. You've got to fall off. Practice. Use the video.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you for all the information you're giving us about how to get over nervousness. But if somebody wanted to communicate with you further, where could they reach you?
They can reach me via my website, www.bailey, presentations.com, or call me 913-897-2615.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. And remember that all of our job chats are available to you anytime on our website, newlandingsjobchat.org. Just click on the Past Chats button.
And as always, we thank you for listening. And until next time, may your days be full of health, happiness, and success.